Here's a question for you guys. What do all of these guys have in common? Marcus Aurelius, 50 Cent, Carl Jung, Kanye West, Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey. Now, all of these people have different personalities, but they have one thing in common, and that's the fact that they are idols to the average person. When you fail to set high expectations for yourself, what you usually do is you spend your time setting high expectations on other people because you know you can never step in the arena like they have in life. So these people that I spoke about earlier, these are idols. These are people in some shape or form have inspired people in whatever field of work they work in. For 50 Cent, it's music, it's business. For Steve Jobs, of course, it's entrepreneurship, what he's created with Apple, the creative vision he has. With Marcus Aurelius, it's some of the philosophies that he went by. Carl Jung is the same. Kanye West is a visionary himself, starting off as just a rapper, producer, going all the way to the top where he has his own fashion brand and inspired an entire generation of musicians. But they all have different walks of life that they've been down, and they are idols to some people. So I want you guys to think of idols for a minute. Whenever we're watching idols on the television, listening to them on the radio, wherever it is online, we always see two types of people. We see the fans and we see the critics. These are the two people. People either fall into one of the two categories. And usually with the fans, these guys are in such awe of the people that they're following, whether that's a musician, whether that's an athlete, whether that's a celebrity, a politician, that they never really have any criticism for the person. They put this person on a pedestal and every single thing they say is liquid gold. I've got a friend who watches a lot of the self-improvement content, and some of the points I make are very similar to one of the creators he listens to, but if I make the video, it will go over his head. But that creator he's put on a pedestal and has the halo effect on, he's going to listen to them. Now, that's not his fault. That's human nature. That's something even I do myself. If you look into my behavior, I do the same. Now, what happens when you're a fan, and the reason why that can be an issue, is because you end up separating yourself from the person that you actually admire. This is actually weird because in the self-improvement space, a lot of the coaches, teachers, gurus, whatever you want to call it, we're all speaking the same spiel, which is basically you guys can improve your life. This is how I did it. This is my story. Can you relate to it? Do it in your own life. But a lot of the times when people are watching you, they admire you, right? They look up to you. Because they look up to you, there's that separation. There's the gap between you and them, which is good because in order for you to actually learn from somebody, you have to see them as somebody above you in some shape or form. If I'm going to be paying for a coaching services, I need to know that you know a lot more than me and you have a hard work ethic and you actually get the job done and you know what you're talking about and you can fill in the gap that I can't fill in by myself. But at the same time, you've got to be very careful of fan mentality because when you remain a fan, you never ever decide to actually go for the dreams yourself. You're too busy admiring somebody else chase their goals. And because you see a bit of yourself in the story of the person that you're looking up to, you feel like you accomplished something when you listen to them achieving their dreams. And this is a facade. This is noise in your head. I remember when me and my friends used to go clubbing. A big group of us when we was 18. And, you know, the only thing you really want to think about when you're going out 18 is you're going to be speaking to women. You're going to be getting sloppy drunk. Whenever one of my friends within the social circle would pull, whether he's got a girl that's interested to him and they're speaking, it would always feel like all of us are getting a victory in some shape or form. Have you ever had that? It's like a collective victory. Girls, if a girl watches this, she's going to be thinking, what the hell are you guys doing? But I'm sure girls have a similar experience, maybe not in the same as men when it comes to going out, but there's always a situation where you see your friend winning in something and you're not jealous. You feel like almost you've accomplished something by seeing them accomplish it because it symbolizes that you have a chance too. Because typically with your friends, you see yourselves on a level playing field, right? But when you've got somebody that you look up to, you end up basically thinking that this person is above you and the results they get is only because they are better than you. And this is where you fall into the conscious or subconscious trap of thinking that this person is superior by maybe genetics or circumstances and you can never reach these levels. Because you don't believe you can reach these levels, you never attempt to try reach those levels. Because you never attempt to try reach those levels, you never really know what your full potential is. Now, of course, I'll do a whole nother video on comparisons. I believe there's a healthy and unhealthy way to do that. But I just wanted to cover the first type of person, the person who becomes the fan of these idols. The second type of people that you typically see is the critics, right? The people who see somebody doing something and they always have something negative to say. Like I said at the start of the video, when you don't set high expectations for yourself, you end up projecting expectations that you should be setting on yourself onto somebody else. But my question to that is, I'm absolutely okay from taking criticism from somebody when it's constructive, when it's going to move me forward, when they know a little bit more than me. But what you got to be careful of is a lot of people are criticizing people that they could never compete with. A matter of fact, these people giving the criticism, they're not actually pursuing greatness in any shape or form in their own life. I had a friend many years ago that I used to work with, and when I was doing music, recording music, he always gave me good feedback. And he used to speak about how he wanted to be a musician as well. There's a certain type of music he wanted to do, and whenever he would listen to my music, rather than just listening to it, giving me feedback on my music or saying I like this, he'd always say, yeah, I like that, but why don't you try doing this? I'm thinking when I put out my project, this is the sort of route I'm going to take. And at the time, I was new to recording music, right? 18 years old, not really that skilled, still learning the ins and outs of the studio engineer, mixing, mastering, vocal projection, all of this kind of stuff. And every single time that he would criticize my music and tell me how he's going to work on this project, I would continue to release music, taking on or trying to take on the feedback he was giving me. Months, weeks, years went by. He never, ever released a project. But every time I released something, he was the first person to call me and say, what about this shot? What about this shot? And what I realized with him at a certain point in my life is that he wasn't necessarily giving me this criticism because he wanted to see the best in me. I believe he was giving me this criticism because he saw me as a potential come up. If he could shape me into what he knows he couldn't be, what he isn't willing to do, then basically he could take credit for my success. Why am I giving you this example? In this example, I wasn't actually the idol. But basically, he knew he couldn't live up to his own expectations. So rather than setting himself those high expectations, he projected them onto me. And he tried to get me to live up to them. And I guess the result of that, he would get some sort of dopamine spike to let him know that, hey, look, you made this person who he is. So you should take credit. You are a good guy, etc. And this is what I tell people to be aware of when you're a critic. You're looking at somebody else. Think about it when we're watching sports, TV shows, political leaders, whoever it is. There's always something negative that you can say about this person, right? There always is, right? No one's perfect. We all know that. You, me, them, whoever. But for once in your life, before you decide to critique someone, I want you to ask yourself, where are the areas in your life that you're not performing as best as you could be? Where are you not taking action in your own life? See, when I go to a boxing fight, I have no issue being in the crowd and throwing insults at the boxers that I don't like, their technique. But knowing for a full fact, if I stepped in the ring, I wouldn't even last 5 seconds with these guys, even the amateurs, right? But that's not what it's about. But when I'm watching these people, what I'm making sure I know is that I'm watching them from the perspective of being a fan. I'm okay to be a critic. But when I go back home, I've got areas in my life which I am critiquing myself and making sure that I improve it. And if these people were to critique me, me fully knowing how much they dedicate themselves to their own path of mastery, I would respect it. I would take it with a pinch of salt because they might not know my path, similar to how I don't necessarily know their path, the ins and outs. I'm not really one to give advice or critique. But I would respect the fact that at least in their area, their arena that they're fighting in for a better life, they're doing everything they can. They've got critics. They're taking on feedback. They're working. Now, as far back as I can remember, growing up, idol culture has always been something that we've had as far back as I can remember. I remember growing up in the 2000s, the noughties, right? Listening to music, musicians, and everybody like that. And we really look up to these people, and we go to school and we study about these historical figures. History was one of my favorite classes. You'll see in my videos, I'm always referring to different things like philosophy, historical figures. It all comes from my background, my influences, my identity, which I speak about in my videos. But when we're looking at these people, we end up looking at the good and the bad. I remember in history, we used to have to study historical figures, Martin Luther King's, Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, the history of the Tudors, Victorian times, things like this. And you're looking at all these great people who basically took it upon themselves to try do something, change the world in some shape or form, leave their influence on the earth. And, the whole objective of history is to basically criticize what they did. You're meant to do a deep analysis, the good and the bad, and you're meant to basically extract the lessons, weirdly enough, write an assignment on it, and then present it to the class, right? Let's say you're studying someone like Winston Churchill. What was the things that got him to the position that he's in? What was his influences? But what I talk about in my channel. And after you would present that to the class. But whenever you did that, you might get an A in this particular thesis or analysis you did on Martin Luther King and how he had these particular traits and what impact he had on the civil rights. But we weren't told as kids that when we go away from that class, what can we learn about that and how can we apply these lessons into our own lives? We just separated these people as these idols, where we're either critiquing them or we're basically praising them and we're fans of them. It was always one of the two. It was never how can we look at these people, learn from them, but actually apply some of the lessons they had in their lives into our own life. It's very, very rare that you find people who actually do that. Usually it's either critics or fans. I want you to ask yourself, which one do you fall into? When you're watching videos like this, are you focused on the good or the bad? Are you actually getting the lessons that I'm speaking about in my videos? What do you take away when you go away from this? Leave a comment below on what you're getting from this. But idol culture, I believe, the reason people procrastinate is because our lives are boring. We don't want to live within our own lives. I've been guilty on this. That's why I say we. So what we do instead is we look at people whose lives look a lot better than ours. And these expectations we should be setting on ourselves, the standards we should be setting up on ourselves, we set on them. And we find some sort of joy in waking up every single day and just basically critiquing or praising these people for their accomplishments. Yet time's passing by and we're nowhere near where we need to be. I used to hate when my mum used to say to me when I was younger, let's go to church. Because when you go to church, you have to be around people, put on a fake smile, act as if you're like this really goody-goody two-shoes, etc. And really and truly, I didn't know too much about the Bible, spirituality. I didn't really read into it, I'll be honest with you. If I did, I heard the little stories. Noah built a boat, the boat, water came to the earth, drowned the world, etc., etc. When I actually started to read the Bible, one of my friends advised me, read it from a metaphorical point of view. I decided to take the bits of the Bible and I basically read the New International Version. Reason being is I couldn't understand the thou arts I couldn't. If I can't understand the message, I can't relate to it, what it's telling me. But when my friend said, read it metaphorically, I decided to read some of the stories. And a lot of stories within the Bible speaks about how God disliked idolatry, especially when it was someone outside of him. You've got all these idols that you're praising for their accomplishments and things like that. Whilst the things of God always would focus on you, what you're doing, what your sins are, how you're behaving, how you're performing. And I think in a weird way, God kind of knew. He knew that if we focus on ourselves, naturally we're going to progress if we actually hold ourselves to high standards. But idolatry just has us wasting time, feeling like we've accomplished something by critiquing somebody else or praising somebody else, feeling like we're part of their journey when we're not. This can be a big problem. And in the self-improvement space, we all quote these books. We all take the advice from the coaches, and there's a lot of gems. I listen to the ones with the music in the background. This video, there's going to be no music. This is a pretty straightforward video of me talking to you guys like I do with some of my previous ones. I've got the cinematic type ones as well. But I wanted this message to sink into you guys because I spoke about in a video about players and spectators. But this one's bigger than that. This one I'm talking about, in general, the culture we have embedded in our system of having idols and how we treat those idols. Isn't it funny how you can make a song as an artist, show it to your friend, great quality, and if he's listening to it on repeat, he might never tell you. I used to have this when I was a musician. When I was doing music, there was people who would listen to my songs on repeat and they wouldn't tell me till years later I've stopped. But when there's a new album by whoever artist is out, they call all their friends. Have you heard this? They're sending all the tracks, 16 of them. That's because they see that person as an idol. You know, I never actually understood why record labels pump so much money into these huge music video productions. But the reason they do that is because the only way you can get someone to invest into somebody is if they see them as an idol. If they see them as somebody above them. Because for the most part, we're wired in a sense that unless we admire somebody, we're not even going to take their feedback that much seriously. That's why it's hard to take feedback from your parents, your closest friends. But if your hero from your childhood says something simple like, you should read more books, something simple, I could tell you that any given day of the week, you're going to listen to that one and you're going to say, yeah, that really stuck with me. That really resonated with me. You went through a process in order to digest that information and advice. Now, I don't believe there's anything wrong with having idols, but I believe the ultimate way for you to stop procrastinating, focusing on what they're doing, is you're meant to use your idols as a reference. Going back to my history class, we would write these long essays and we would basically reference loads of books, talk about what we learned about this figure, historical figure or historical war, whatever it was, some sort of significant event in the past. And we would reference all sorts of books. And basically by the end of it, of course, by the conclusion, we come to our conclusion of what we've learned from these books. That's basically the education system, history class. I don't know how it's like in your parts of the world, but that's how we would do it. Now, history was my favorite lesson because it challenged me to think, deep thinking, big picture thinker. You could probably get that when you watch my videos that I have a background in that sort of subject. But this way of studying people, taking away the lessons, coming up with your own conclusions, this is what we need to start doing for even the little celebrities that we follow. Look into their lives, not from a judgmental point of view, but what do they do right? What is it about their character traits that we like about them? See, you can't replicate how somebody looks. That's genetics. But maybe the way they carry themselves, their determination, their resilience, their characteristics, you can definitely take those on board. And when we begin to reference what these guys are doing, that's when we can actually now take those lessons, apply it into our own lives, and we can see progress in our own lives. Now we can be a fan or a critic from a point of, I understand what it's like to be somebody who's trying to produce results. We're a little bit more fair with our criticism when we do it that way. When I watch YouTube videos now, I used to complain about things like ads when I'm watching a video. And I used to think, man, these ads are annoying. I'm just trying to get to the video, watch it from start to finish. But when somebody's putting all that time into making a video from start to end, don't they deserve a little bit of money? And these ads might be the thing that's helping them pay for the subscriptions they need to keep these videos looking at the quality that you guys enjoy watching. Maybe their audience isn't investing in them. See, once you become a player in your own life, somebody who's also trying to produce results, setting high standards for themselves in whatever that is in your life. I'm sure there's people of different walks of life watching these videos. That's when you can now watch someone else who's accomplished something and really appreciate what they've done. You're no longer judgmental because you understand what it's like to be in the arena and be criticized by other people. The expectations you project on other people should be set upon yourself. Hold yourself to a high standard and your life is going to begin to move forward. My name's Tino, and I'll see you guys in the next one.